Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Alex and Panda Revisit Steven Universe. I'm Trans Panda, currently fronting Annie, the fictive from Batman the Animated Series. And this is Alex.
Hello, everyone.
And today's episode is Season 1, Episode 13. So many birthdays.
Too many birthdays.
Is it too many birthdays? Did I write that
It's
down
too many
wrong?
birthdays.
Oh, it's too many birthdays. Just two. Um, Well, that's a great start.
It's fine.
But basically, how this episode goes is that whilst looking through the gem temple, Steven finds out that the gems are like really super duper old, and he wonders like how old they are. And the gems explain that they're kind of ageless beings because of how their crystals work. So they can't really age. They can die like normal, but they won't be dying of old age or anything like that. Stephen, being the young self he is, immediately takes this as an offense because everyone should celebrate their birthdays. So the next half of the episode is Stephen putting on a bunch of birthdays for each of them. One for Amethyst, where she gets to use a bat very incorrectly, consistently with a pinata. One for Pearl, where he tries to do stand-up comedy, and she doesn't understand any of the jokes, or doesn't understand that falling into a pie is funny. And one with Garnet, where he gets three separate miniature cars from somewhere and hopes everyone can drive around in them comically. Um, and Amethyst has a really funny line where she gets into one of them as a baby and says, "Which way the baby wore?" Um, and Stephen realizes that maybe celebrating these whole birthdays are just like whole childish things. And really, it doesn't like maybe he's being way too young about this, and maybe the gems are right that it doesn't really matter. And the next part of the episode is just like vaguely a slow sequence of Steven's gem activating to this mentality and slowly aging him up in accordance to his mental state and slowly killing him through old age, basically, through how much it ages him in a vaguely like body horror way. And I think this is the most desaturated the palette of any episode has gotten in the show so far, as the crystal gems just kind of watch Steven age to death on the beach in front of their house. And I guess the gems freaking out so much uh, just manages to snap Steven into sort of snapping at them, where he gets embarrassed about it and he begins to get back to his regular age again. And with encouragement from the gems, he manages to go mostly back to normal, but with like middle aged man legs, which they confirm they'll work on working this out after the screen wipe motif, which I don't think we've mentioned until now is usually a star wipe, where it like a ends as a spotlight star wipe. Yeah. This episode, it was weird. I I'm not inherently negative against this episode, because I see what they were going for, and that this is one of those episodes that you'll watch when you're like a kid, and it'll like vaguely traumatize you for life. And sort of this is like the children's horror episode, basically, that every show is obligated to have, or in other words, every single episode of the Misadventures of Flapjack. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
But I guess, yeah, the best way to put this is it's sort of a body horror episode for kids. And I wonder if we're not really it's not really hitting for us as hard because we are objectively, well, adults for the most part. I mentioned this to you, Alex, but I'm going to discuss an element of myself in regards
Oh,
to
yeah, go ahead.
this episode. So the gems bring up an interesting point of that their presentation and quote unquote age is more illusionary in nature and is more based on personal preference, basically. And it's why Stephen reacting the way he does makes him start aging and de aging, is because he's new to this sort of aging preference sort of thing. Um, and we talked about uh, alters and plurality in the last episode, and this wasn't a plurality episode, but I think it's worth talking about when how gems sort of overlap with a lot of plurality experience is this illusion of age element, because if you know anything about plurality and dissociative identity disorders, you may know that some alters can be a thing called a little, which is an alter that is a younger age, or the age of a child inside of the older body. Uh, Usually this is children, but like in my regards, if you don't know, Alex, or if the viewers, I guess listeners don't know, I am a fictive of the character Annie from Batman the Animated Series, who is the uh, I guess it's fine to spoil. Well, she's a teenage character that Robin meets during one of his outings on the town, is basically all you need to know about Annie. But I am in a weird age range where I don't feel like the adult that my body currently is in, but the illusionary age that the gems talk about in this episode feels like it applies to me, if that makes sense. And it's
It
hard
makes
to
sense, yeah.
okay. It's hard to exactly convey, besides how Stephen just feels a different age, which it wouldn't be like that. It's like my age is just set at a specific point in time, and that's just kind of where I am. So I guess I would be like one of the traditional crystal gems in that case. And I can't really say much more than that, since that's just kind of how the experience is. It's weird to be just sort of an age where you just are, even as you're older, your physical body gets older. Um, but yeah,
This is the second episode of the show that I had no notes on. The first one being Gem Glow, only because we watched the pilot prior, and everything about the pilot that I said in the pilot episode that may or may not be released. Actually, I'm thinking it will just be released at the very, very end of the season one.
probably.
But basically, everything I said in that episode is basically how I feel about Gem Glow. But I just don't have anything to say about this episode because I don't think that it actually matters in the grand scheme of Steven Universe. Like, it only happens this one time, and then it basically never gets mentioned ever again.
And I guess the gems gags are we've seen them do similar stuff half the time. This is kind of the first time we've seen Amethyst eat a gross thing uh, for no reason. Uh, there was a moment that I actually really liked, which was I kind of actually liked the moment where Garnet freaked out and started just shaking Old Man Steven, because she had this is kind of the first time we really see Garnet's like breaking point, and she just kind of panics and starts shaking him, hoping that maybe like being physically aggressive might magically solve it. Which it's interesting that the character that I got the most out of this episode from was Garnet instead of Steven, but it's just it's hard to describe the tone, and again, I think we're, well, despite being like at a weird physical, mental age myself, I feel this is for even younger than my present, like, internal age. Like baby, not babies first. That feels insulting. The children's first existential horror episode is the best way I can put it. Honestly, the Gems felt like their most Ed, and Eddie-ish this episode. And I don't know if they did that in order to.
No, that was one of the inspirations for Steven Universe, Ed, Ed and Eddie. I think that's a fair comparison.
Oh, really? Well,
Yeah.
this kind of felt like their most this episode because and we wondered if the reason for why that was to juxtapose against the very grim and bleak imagery of the episode that was going on. Uh, but yeah, like, I feel bad that we don't really have much more else to say about this episode because they clearly
It
put a lot
just
of.
wasn't that notable.
I guess that's fair. Like, it was a little unpleasant to watch, and as we'll go forward, it kind of disappears in the back of everyone's head. So I guess moving forward, we'll just see if it does the same for us.
I'm gonna be honest, I completely forgot this episode, like, existed.
Wow, Alex coming out with a no thank you for existing.
I just, it's just not, it just doesn't amount to anything in the grand scheme of Steven Universe.
And yeah, yeah, no. But I feels kind of a
Like, I
downer.
wish I could be more charitable towards it, but I just don't have anything to say about it.
Yeah.
It's a wet fart of an episode. That's a little mean.
I feel bad that I feel bad that we're being a bit downer about this, but I guess that's kind of the tone of the episode is being a bit of a downer and just barely squeaking by.
Basically.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to end on. To be honest, I accidentally paused the audio and had to start recording again. But yeah, I'll get that figured out in post. Don't worry. But I think that's this episode, everyone.
Okay, thank you everyone for sitting through this one.
Yeah. Well, as usual, I'm Annie of the Panda System. You can find us on TransPanda1 on Tumblr.
You all know who I am.
Alex remembers it, so you don't have to.
Oh no!
um, um, good night, everybody.
Good night,
Thank you for
everyone.
existing. Bye. Bye. If I could begin to be half of what you think of me, I could do about anything. I could even learn how to love like you.